Hello, it's Brian Martin. I know it's been a while since we've been together like this. Today, I want to take a few minutes to share with you some more from my book, Eternity is the E in Love. It's a nice distraction. Today, with the coronavirus affecting so many people, it's pretty nice not to have to think about it and just to take a few minutes to go somewhere else. My book is it's a story about how people can have significance and meaning in life, and it's divided into two parts, and the two parts between them is something that I call a segue, and this particular segue is the black cube and the distant fire. Already, when I'm thinking about this, it kind of sounds like it's relevant for today. So let me share this with you, and here we go. Just get situated here. I created a vision, or it created me. I'm not sure. I was thinking about how people from the past speak to us today. Mostly, it's in books. Before writing, our ancestors left hieroglyphics and tools, which told us a little about how they survived. Oral traditions were finally recorded, and their voices started to be heard more clearly. It wasn't until the printing press and after that, sound recordings, that their writings and their voices became available to the masses. The most ancient voices we hear from the past, the most ancient voices we hear from the past are just a few thousand years old. That's a drop in the history of humanity. Those voices have had a profound effect on us. Think of the influence ancient philosophers and religious leaders have had on us today. Moses, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, Confucius, Plato, Socrates. Future generations will have more information from current generations than they can process in a lifetime. How long do you think it will take to listen to and to watch the entire content of YouTube? There's no end to it. But what if you were living 10,000 years from now and you needed to communicate with past generations? Perhaps future people face a calamity which could only be averted by the actions of ancient people like us. You know from watching Back to the Future that changing the past changes future outcomes. That was a fun movie, wasn't it? But how would future people talk to past people? Interesting, right? That is the content of the vision I created. I'm sure someone else had the idea and wrote about it, but I'm not aware of it, or I've forgotten where it came from. The more I think about it, I'm wondering if future generations figured out ways to communicate to us, and we're just not aware of it. That is a crazy idea. Future generations don't even exist. They can't communicate at all. It is indeed a crazy idea. Let me explain the vision. There is a huge, expansive green belt about a mile wide, stretching up further than you can see. It's sort of like Yosemite, it rises sort of like Yosemite Valley, rises up to the top of Half Dome, only it is infinity. People say people say that the green belt rises into the future. On a clear day, with the right pair of binoculars, you can even see what appears to be people in the future signaling back to us. I have seen people waving colorful flags on the green belt, hoping to be seen by future people. They say the real reason the Chinese invented fireworks was to signal future people. One day, a giant truck carrying an even larger, huge, black, windowless cube backed up on the verdant grass. A set of cranes lifted the cube and placed it in the middle of the verdant grass and drove away. Crowds of people approached the cube, trying to figure out what it was. As they stood there, the ground and the cube began to shake, and the people ran away. But the shaking soon stopped, and they returned to check out the cube. They were so fascinated with the black cube that people stopped bringing their binoculars and focused their attention on the cube. Kids figured out how to climb on top of it. On hot days, people sat in its shade. Every once in a while, the cube would shake and people would run from it. Soon, people figured out that the cube was shaking because it was expanding and growing. In just 1 month, the cube doubled in size. Soon, it was too big for kids to climb on. One day, some kids were messing around and figured out how to get inside the cube. The police came and tried to stop them. But more and more people got inside, and as it grew, some people started camping in the cube. In just a few years, the cube grew so large that there were stores and banks, hotels, even parks inside the windowless cube. People from all over the world came to observe the phenomenon. Conventions converged there, along with amusement parks. The world's tallest Ferris wheel was located in the black cube. Whole towns sprung up in it with schools and universities. They built escalators and elevators to get up to the upper floors. They even had helicopters to get from one end to the other. The cube was now several miles wide and high. Only a few people looked to the future anymore. One day, an old man was on the verdant carpet looking through his set of special future-seeing binoculars. "Well, I'll be," he exclaimed. "The future's on fire." He passed the binoculars around to people, and sure enough, smoke could be seen in the future. And what seemed to be red flags waving and red smoke like a distress signal. Most people didn't notice it, though. Life in the cube was amazing. A few of us who saw the distress signal wanted to get a better view. So we decided to climb to the top of the cube. It was the tallest thing in the world, even taller than Mount Everest. We entered the cube and started to make our way to the top. We passed through cities, huge parks, industrial complexes, shopping malls. The police stopped us and asked what we were doing. We were detained for a few hours while the police investigated our story. We were finally released, dismissed as irrelevant. It was late and we found rooms on the 53rd level. It took a week for us to make it all the way to the ceiling. The door to the roof of the cube was no larger than the attic access in my house, and we squeezed through to the roof. It was freezing cold on the roof, and the wind was blowing, and we had to wear oxygen masks. The ice was thick and very slippery, and there was no railing around the cube's edge. If you fell and slipped off the edge, that would be the end of you. Standing there, we pulled out future-seeing binoculars and looked into the future. We searched and searched the horizon, but we couldn't see anything except for occasional wisps of smoke rising here and there. Nobody waved back at us, not even with red flags. We stayed on the freezing roof for over an hour, and still we saw nothing. It was time for us to leave and to figure out what to do next. Back on the edge of the verdant grassy belt, we sat by a fire and brainstormed ideas. We heard of some scientists who were conducting groundbreaking experiments on communicating with the future, involving particle research. So we traveled to the university and spoke to a group of researchers who were sympathetic about our concern for the future. Their researchers showed that particles have the ability to be at two places at one time. That is, they defied what we know about time and space. If, quote, if we can assign specific information to particles, then hypothetically, the information can be conveyed to two places anywhere in the universe at one moment. The potential exists for information to transcend time and space and be shared. This was exhilaration. But there was a problem. Quote, the problem is that the energy required to convey meaningful information, that is, having multiple particles operating simultaneously, is greater than we can build given our current knowledge of physics. They went on to explain that this limitation was the reason why time travel for human beings is impossible. The most that could be hoped for was that tiny clusters of particles containing bits of information might be shared, but there would be no way to read the information. This seemed like a dead end for us. Later, as I was camping on the green belt, gazing up into infinity, I wondered if people in the future solved the problem. Could it be that they figured out how to place tiny bits of information on particles and plant it in various parts of people's brains in the past, so that flashes of insight were experienced, sometimes as images or visions or intuitions, depending on what part of the brain was stimulated? Now that was a crazy thought. What if future people had successfully planted flashes of insight into our brains and we hadn't developed awareness of it yet? Okay, so that's all I'm going to read today. It's a kind of a fun story. I really like this. Of course I do. It's from my book, Eternity is the E in Love, Finding Meaning and Changing the World with the Power of Love. And you can find it on Amazon. Hey, it's crazy times that we live in. Take a few moments today to appreciate what you have. Take a few moments today to plan out what you're going to be doing in the next few weeks. And let's keep in touch and work together. God bless you. I love you. Have a great day.